Dr. Griffin Cole received his dental degree from the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio in 1993 and has been practicing biological dentistry since that time in Austin, Texas. In 2006, he became ozone certified and received both the board certification in Naturopathic medicine and his degree in Integrative Biological Dental Medicine in 2010 from the School of Integrative Biological Dental Medicine. More importantly, Dr. Griffin received his fellowship with the IAOMT in 2008 and drafted the Academy's fluoride brochure and the official scientific review on ozone use in root canal therapy. His fluoride brochure is available at the Academy booth, and I pass it out to a lot of my patients. Thank you, Griffin. He is a past president of the IAOMT and serves on the board of directors, the mentor committee, the fluoride committee, and is the fundamentals course director. He's been featured on numerous radio and television programs. He's been published in 4 national peer-reviewed publications for his restorative and cosmetic dentistry, and in 2013 became the first dentist to be published in a peer-reviewed journal for his case study on the treatment of bisphosphonate-related osteonecrosis of the jaw, utilizing ozone therapy for successful treatment in that disease. He lectures to health professionals on both practice management and biological dentistry. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Griffin Cole.
Very good. Tess, sound good? Good morning. Everybody's awake. Okay, that's actually not part of my presentation, but I think that's really cool. So the topic of fluoride is not a new topic, obviously, but it's really fascinating once you get into the history of it and how it came to be. Those of you who were in the fundamentals yesterday got some great information from Dr. Kennedy, and I'm going to try to elaborate a bit on that. But you know, for those of you out there who still think that maybe it's not as bad as some of us have said, I want to reassure you that it is. This poison that's been touted as the panacea in dentistry really is not that, and it's got a very toxic history, and I'm going to go through that in just a second. The precautionary principle states that the introduction of a new product or process whose ultimate effects are disputed or unknown should be resisted, and water fluoridation totally breaks that code. Let me show you something here. So a lot of us probably think that the ADA were some of the beginning supporters of water fluoridation, but they really weren't. In fact, quite the opposite. In 1944, they made this very bold statement, which I've highlighted for you a bit. I'm going to go down about halfway. Because of our anxiety to find some therapeutic procedure that will promote mass prevention of caries, the seeming potentialities of fluorine appear speculatively attractive, but in light of our present knowledge or lack of knowledge of the chemistry of the subject, the potentialities for harm far outweigh those for good. This is a very bold statement. This is just 3 months before Grand Rapids gets fluoridated as a test city. So trust me when I say I don't think they had anything to do with this early on. Now, fast forward 30 years, and we get this statement. Individual dentists must be convinced that they not be familiar with scientific reports and field investigations on fluoridation to be effective participants, and that non-participation is overt neglect of personal responsibility. I mean, I feel threatened by that. That's a very, very strong statement. I don't know how we went that far, but as I've looked into this in detail, I've noticed that the ADA sort of follows what the other scientists say, and then they act like they adopted it and that they support it. People have been arguing against water fluoridation since day one, okay, mostly MDs. These are just a few books that I have in my office. That top one there was actually published in 1957. All three of those books are written by MDs, and they're very well-respected authors. So this is not a new fight by any means. It's been satirized in movies and some television shows over the years. These are just a couple.
Disgusting. You know what they put in the water, don't you? Fluoride. Yeah, fluoride. On the pretext that it strengthens your teeth.
Dave? What happened, Dave?
You know what this stuff does to you? It actually weakens your will. Takes away the capacity for free and creative thought and makes you a slave.
I'm going to stop it till you get it back on the screen, brother. Come on, honey. Don't touch it. Just stick around for a second. Sit down with video. Hold on. Stay here.
Disgusting. You know what they put in the water, don't you? Fluoride. Yeah, fluoride. On the pretext that it strengthens your teeth. That's ridiculous. You know what this stuff does to you? It actually weakens your will. Takes away the capacity for free and creative thought and makes you a slave to the state.
Is it possible to OD on toothpaste?
Definitely, if it's fluoride toothpaste. Each tube comes with a warning. If swallowed, please contact the Poison Control Center immediately.
How much fluoride would it take to kill a person?
The PTD, probably toxic dose, is 5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Regular tube of toothpaste, you're talking 170 grams, 0.25% of which is fluoride. So 170 times 0.25 is 425. She's 50 kilograms, say. Yeah. So she would need 250 milligrams for it to be toxic. And if there's 425 milligrams in one tube.
So one tube would do it?
Assuming she absorbed it all, didn't throw it up.
Well, then for sure 2 tubes would get the job done.
So it's only satire if they're making fun of it, but I like to choose to believe that the writers actually were trying to make a point in both cases. I don't think they were trying to be funny about it. I hope. I need to go into a history of the characters that are involved in the history of fluoride. Now, you'll have to stay with me because I've condensed 50 years of history into 3 minutes. And I'm sure I'm leaving some things out, but I think you'll get a good picture if I can just go through this. So let's start with our first character, Dr. Frederick McKay, a young dentist from the East Coast who moves to Colorado Springs in 1901 to practice dentistry. And shortly thereafter, he notices these brown stains that are on a lot of the residents in Colorado Springs. So he tries to figure out what's going on. He even enlists G.V. Black, all the dentists in the room know who that is, to come down there and investigate it with him. Fast forward now to 1923. We've gone 22 years ahead here. Dr. McKay is still trying to figure out what caused the brown stains. Black is now long dead, and he very cleverly, though, notices that there's other towns that have the same issues, and he convinces the town leaders in Oakley, Idaho, to change their water source, which was coming from a warm spring, to a separate water source, just to see. He suspected there was something in the water, but he wasn't sure what. So sure enough, within a few years, children start to develop teeth with no brown mottling. Dr. McKay and another doctor, Dr. Kempf of the U.S. Public Health Service, they decide to visit Bauxite, Arkansas, another town with brown stains on the teeth. The important thing about this town is literally owned by Alcoa, the large steel manufacturers. They own this town. This is where their big plant is. So they go there and they start to investigate, and they give their findings to them, and it ends up on the desk of a man named H.V. Churchill, Alcoa's chief chemist, who had spent the last few years trying to dispute that aluminum cookware wasn't dangerous. So he studies the water because he's got much more high-tech equipment and finds very high levels of fluoride. He lets McKay know that, so now McKay can now target fluoride in his testing, and lo and behold, his 30-year quest is over. Fluoride in the water is what caused the brown stain. On the heels of this news, Public Health Service scientist Trenley Dean is hired by Andrew Mellon to investigate how much fluoride children's teeth could actually absorb before disintegrating. No joke. Andrew Mellon, you should know, is the Secretary of the Treasury at the time, so he's got authority over the PHS and controlling shareholder of, you guessed it, Alcoa. Complete conflict of interest. This whole story is a conflict of interest, by the way. Dean does a few tests, and he suggests that fluoride helps teeth and actually decreases decay. Well, this was all that Alcoa scientist Gerald Cox needed to propose that the nation's water supplies be fluoridated. And in 1937, Cox announces that fluoride is required for good formation of teeth. So now this is good. We've got some scientists behind it. Things are rolling. We got the Public Health Service liking it. It's not quite enough. We now need a lawyer, a mouthpiece to ram it down the throats of the American public. So in comes Oscar Ewing. Oscar Ewing is hired and immediately initiates a national fluoridation project through the Public Health Service. This was the 1945 Grand Rapids, Michigan, and also up in New York they did Newburgh versus Kingston. So we had 4 test studies basically that were testing to see if this worked. And it was supposed to be 10 to 15 years, which is a reasonable test. Well, after only 2 years and really no significant data, Ewing begins this PR campaign to push fluoridation. And in that year, 1947, he is named to head the Federal Security Agency, which is today called Health and Human Services. He hires none other than a man named Edward Bernays, famous PR guy who was hired by the tobacco companies to convince women to start smoking, and he was very successful. We saw the old posters from way back then. It was all sexy to smoke. The doctors, 4 out of 5 recommended filtered cigarettes, whatever. He was very good at this, so now his job is to convince the American public that fluoridation is needed. He even gets Dr. Spock to join him, and thus starts this whole crusade, and the rest is history. It's very ugly history. So is this thing going off on me again? Come fix it while I keep talking. What's up? Good. So by 1950, 89 cities are fluoridated now, despite no credible evidence that it actually works. So in 1950, Alcoa now has a new job. They're now selling fluoride to the cities. So reality has been completely erased, and we've now been convinced that we need fluoride as our medicine. Now, I'd be remiss not to mention the worst of the bunch, Harold Hodge. In fact, his picture is even the grainiest one up there, which is appropriate. This man was the lead toxicologist in the Manhattan Project, which, of course, was making our first atomic weapons. And they needed fluoride, tons, millions of pounds of fluoride to enrich the uranium. He was also involved with injecting plutonium into unsuspecting human citizens to see how they reacted to radioactive elements. This is a really great guy. His workers at the Manhattan Project were also getting very, very sick, so they assumed it was all the radioactivity. Well, it turns out it was actually the fluoride that was making everybody sick. Now, just a little background on how he became the official spokesperson for fluoridation. So in 1943, this is when DuPont is making hundreds of millions of tons of fluoride for the Manhattan Project, and they have what's called a pollution incident, a very bad accident. Happens in 1943. The pollution starts going downwind and starts to affect farms, very famous farms. Two very specific areas are Salem County and Gloucester County. These farms are so popular and so good at their produce that they do all the tomatoes for Campbell's Soup. Their peaches are at the Waldorf Astoria and other famous hotels. These are very important farms. Well, that summer in 1943, they began to notice that their crops were dying. Not only that, horses, livestock were dying. The farmers that would pick the produce off the vines and eat it were getting very sick and vomiting for days. This went on for 2 years. So we're at the end of World War II now, 1945, and the farmers decide to sue the federal government because they know that they're responsible. They know that this was all for the Manhattan Project. They got it figured out. They sue them. Obviously, these lawsuits have a huge impact on some top-ranking officials, one in particular, Major General Leslie Groves, who oversaw the Manhattan Project. So in a secret 1946 Manhattan memo from Harold Hodge to the medical section chief, Colonel Warren, he says, and I quote, "Would there be any use in making attempts to counteract the local fear of fluoride on the part of residents of Salem and Gloucester counties through lectures on fluoride toxicology and perhaps the usefulness of fluoride in tooth health?" End quote. And of course, this led to those famous films of him writing the 1.0 on the chalkboard, and the farmers got some token settlements, and fluoridation continued and still does today. So there's your 50 years in 3 minutes. I've left some people out of that, but it's just too much to get into. This is just a recap. Interesting note, though, on Andrew Mellon. He was asked to resign his position as the Secretary of the U.S. Treasury with a review panel citing, quote, "There was a tendency to suppress certain scientific reports of importance to the public health on the grounds that certain commercial interests might be offended." All right, I need to touch on topical just for a couple slides here because it is important to make that distinction. The way topical fluoride works, I'm sure most of you know here, fluoride basically displaces the hydroxyl group in hydroxyapatite, forming what's called fluoroapatite. Supposedly this makes increased hydrogen bonding, smaller crystal lattices, and an overall decrease in solubility. By the way, if you're trying to keep up with the slides I did before, don't even bother. I've modified this so much, I purposely leave out a bunch because I want some surprise element. So, according to CDC, these are the 3 things that topical fluoride does. Enhances remineralization of carious lesions. Am I on the right thing here? Sorry, guys. There we go. Enhances remineralization of carious lesions, inhibits demineralizations, and poisons the enzymes in the oral bacteria, so it's an antibacterial effect. You'll see here in a second that it poisons more than just the oral bacteria enzymes. So what is the IAOMT's position? We do not recommend its use in any form. We have probably a more official statement, but that's the bottom line. We do not recommend its use in any form. Okay, I'm going to give you 4 reasons why we don't as far as topical use. Sodium fluoride has been shown to create apoptosis in human gingival fibroblasts. That's one study. Stannous fluoride causes tissue necrosis and permanent alveolar bone loss when used as a subgingival irrigant. Topical fluoride use in children obviously leads to more urinary fluoride. And gels, like the varnishes, can result in gastric mucosal injuries. These are just 4. There's tons more. Okay, let's get into the fun stuff. Fluoridation. Do all of you know that you can go on the ADA website and they have a 71-page document called Fluoridation Facts? Has everybody looked into that at any point in time? Okay, well, I've studied it in detail. They claim that it's based on generally accepted, peer-reviewed scientific evidence. I looked at all 359 references, and I got to tell you, this is pretty funny. Of the 359, 98, just under 30%, were from internal documents, in-house reports, committee reports, surveys, symposiums, stop me if I say anything scientific, federal registers, lawsuits, monographs, press releases, Gallup studies, letters to the editor, and no joke, personal correspondences. That's 98 of their cited references. The rest of them, the majority of them, came from something called Carey's Research, which is not peer-reviewed, and 2 that are peer-reviewed, one called JADA, obviously, and then one called Community Dental Oral Epidemiology. By the way, there's a great rebuttal to every single point in the Fluoridation Facts online. It's called fluoridedebate.com. It came out in 2000. It's a wonderful thing to read. It's really, really well done. What does WebMD say? WebMD says it's used as medicine. That is correct. They also say that it's taken by mouth for treating weakened bones. Weakened bones. Let me just show you. This is a list of 40 authors comprising 52 studies showing how it weakens the bone. For space reasons, I didn't put the actual studies on there. If anybody wants them, email me after the meeting. I will gladly send you all the studies. Here's a list of some of the systemic effects of fluoride. Poisons enzymes, increases glucose levels, calcifies the pineal gland, decreases thyroid function, impairs kidney function, lowers IQ, causes bone fragility, dental fluorosis, as well as skeletal at higher levels. It's an endocrine disruptor, a developmental neurotoxin, and a cancer-causative agent. All of this is based in science. Let's see what Dr. James Sumner has to say. He's a Nobel laureate. He says, we ought to go slowly with water fluoridation. Everybody knows fluorine and fluorides are very poisonous substances. Let's go away again for some reason, Dave. Let's just keep dropping off. I'll finish the quote while you're coming up. We use them in enzyme chemistry to poison enzymes, those vital agents in the body. That is the reason things are poisoned, because the enzymes are poisoned, and that is why animals and plants die. It's not the best grammar, but he gets his point across. Interesting fact, 14 Nobel laureates have come out and spoken against fluoridation. What do you guys know?
I think it's just disconnecting from here.
Okay, I'm on that one right there. That one. No, I'm good. But get my screen the way I like it. Okay. All right, let's see if this stays up. Okay, so the big problem with water fluoridation is whenever they do a little follow-up study, it's typically 3 to 5 years, which is just too short. You need at least 10. And the studies are never really that accurate anyway, because when you do a study that's that short, keep in mind that children in fluoridated communities have delayed tooth eruption, typically a year. So it's a very clever way to do it, because if you say, well, the DMFS, the decayed, missing, and filled surfaces, that's how they do it. In the fluoridated communities are less than in non-fluoridated. Well, of course they are. They're counting less teeth. So it's not an accurate way to establish if it's really working. Now let's hear what Dr. Bill Moss, and I hope this works, the former head of the CDC Oral Health Division, had to say when he was questioned by town leaders in Sedgwick County about water fluoridation.
It's important to understand that community water fluoridation is effective. Approximately 25% reduction in tooth decay. It's safe. On that, I'm not going to give you any percentage because it is absolutely safe.
Would you expect the incidence of fluorosis to increase in our community?
Yes. Yes, I would expect you would have more children with white flecks on their teeth. I would expect that when you looked at those children, you would think that their teeth were very attractive.
Yeah, very attractive, Bill. You know, as most of you know, if the EPA, who by the way does not regulate additives in water, were to do its true job, fluoridation would have ended immediately based on the NRC panel's recommendations in 2006. Dr. Kennedy talked about this yesterday. I won't get into it too much, but in 2006, the National Research Council had a panel of experts who came out and said that the MCLG, which is the maximum contaminant level goal, or in more simpler terms, the level that protects against adverse health effects and provides an adequate margin of safety, should be 0. It's currently at 4 milligrams per liter. But they said it should be at 0. That should have ended fluoridation right then. Okay, we all hear this comment, right? It's touted over and over again by all the surgeons general. It's all the pro-fluoridationists. Everybody always says that it's one of the 10 most important public health measures of the 20th century. Ever wonder who really authored this? Because it's the CDC is what they say. Well, you can go through the Freedom of Information Act and you can find out exactly who authored it. Just so you know, it came from no toxicologists, no diabetes experts, or anyone outside of the Oral Health Division. There it is. I'll circle it for you. That list is wonderful, too. Look at this, safer and healthier foods. Yeah, that happened as well. So these are the two people, Scott Tomar, a dentist who never published anything on fluoridation up to that point, and Susan Griffin, an economist. Okay, they're not toxicologists. They're only 2 of 30,000 people in the CDC, and at that time, 14,000, and only 30 people in the Oral Health Division. So let's see what the CDC website says about it. The safety and effectiveness of fluoride at levels used in community water fluoridation has been thoroughly documented by scientific and public health organizations using scientific reviews and expert panels. But look at what they also say. This is in 2001. Fluoride's predominant effect is post-eruptive and topical. Post-eruptive and topical. That's accurate. This completely counteracts what fluoridation is about. Fluoridation is supposed to be pre-eruptive and systemic. Okay, in 2012, Director Frieden said, "We are unaware of data about the additional protection from tooth decay that could result from consumption of fluoridated drinking water." Now, to be fair, that quote has been truncated, so I'm going to read you the exact quote. Little history. That question was answered because of Senator Boxer was requesting some information for a constituent, and the constituent wanted to know if an infant's optimal setting that was set by the Institute of Medicine in 1997 of fluoride is 0.01 milligrams per day for infants from 0 to 6 months. Would it be advantageous if they got more fluoride? And he says, "We are unaware of data that directly answers your questions about the additional protection from tooth decay that could result from a greater daily fluoride intake by infants." So it's been truncated a bit, but certainly still means the same thing here. Okay, what does the FDA say? Unapproved drug. I had the honor recently, hopefully most of you have seen that the Fluoride Action Network and our Academy together just made a video, a public service, just a PSA video, where we're basically talking about the FDA warning letter. And again, this was talked about yesterday, but just briefly, the FDA issued a warning letter saying marketing fluoride supplements as cavity preventatives is against federal law since they've never been approved. So we made a video where we're basically trying to take them to task and say, let's go further with that. We petition them, let's actually put this into law and stop all pharmacies from selling supplements. Okay, I titled this slide, "I Can't Make This Stuff Up," because it's so sad, it's laughable. FDA has never approved fluoridation nor banned it. In 1979, they transferred their authority over all additives in drinking water to the EPA. EPA neither approves nor bans fluoridation, but instead transfers that authority over to what's called the National Sanitation Foundation, the NSF. EPA even lends them some people to help them write the NSF Rule 60, a basic rule which states that toxicological studies have been done on fluoridation materials. NSF waives this requirement, and no studies are done. And here's the kicker. Yet they allow vendors of fluoridation materials to use their NSF mark, a symbol of compliance with the NSF Rule 60 standard. Did you catch that? Passing the buck like you wouldn't believe. There has never been a single randomized clinical trial to prove that fluoridation actually works. There has never been a long-term follow-up study to prove that it actually worked. And in fact, in San Antonio, my hometown, they started fluoridating in 2000, and 9 years later, there was a study that came out from the Metro Health Department. So they looked at it for 9 years, spent $3 million, and they were looking to see, did decay rates go down? What they found that is among the poorest of Bexar County's children, the rate had actually increased. And by 2011, it had increased 13%. Silicofluorides have never been FDA approved for ingestion, and they were never proven safe prior to dumping. And don't let any fluoridationist convince you that it dissociates like calcium fluoride, because that was disproven 40 years ago by Dr. Johannes Westendorf in his PhD thesis. Interesting story on this. Westendorf first started looking at the anti-carcinogenic activity of fluoride. And as he got into it, he started to notice a lot more information. So the title of it was Incomplete Dissociation of Silicofluorides Under Physiological Conditions. Done. It's been proven. This is an interesting slide that I can't find anymore, but I'm so excited that I got it. This was a few years ago when a good friend of mine who's a PhD chemist in Austin and I were at a little small town just outside of Austin trying to convince them not to fluoridate. And they had some pro-fluoridation dentists there, and so we were doing our usual spiel. But I found this on the ADA website, and it's about the Paffenbarger Research Center. They do like a collaboration with them to do research. But don't try to read it all. I'm going to make this easy for you guys here. Can you all read that? Let's just go down toward the bottom. After 60 years of community water fluoridation, we still do not know how much fluoride is required to prevent caries. This may be because no one has systematically performed in vitro studies that separate the significant factors under conditions that closely mimic those of the oral environment and then validated those findings in intraoral studies. This is what's supposed to be done. So this new safe level comes out, right? 2011, the EPA and Health and Human Services recommend that they lower the safe level of fluoride from the range of 0.7 to 1.2 down to 0.7. So they're finally admitting that we're getting too much fluoride. And the reason why is because 2 out of every 5 kids have the fluorosis. So the numbers were getting really high. But what about bottle-fed babies? This to me is the ultimate argument. You can go in there and you can spout all you want to about science with other scientists, but I always get into dose control because I think that this is a no-brainer. You know, human breast milk by design is very, very low in fluoride, 0.004 parts per million. So if you want to give a bottle-fed baby up to 0.7, they're going to get over 250 times the level of mother's milk. And, you know, I use this argument when I look at the city council members' eyes, and I know they've got kids, and I say, how do you justify that? And they usually go, eh. Okay, don't try to read that. Don't worry. I'm going to make this easy for you. This was a story that came out in the ADA News last year, and this was after they were now getting it beyond just a recommendation. Now we're going to make it law that we have to lower that level. But I want you to... I read through this in the very bottom. I'm going to read this to you. Let's just say, let's go. The association urges communities to continue fluoridating water at levels that the government recommends. Of course they do. They have no choice. People in what the association said is a dwindling number of non-fluoridated communities should help educate their state and local officials about the need to fluoridate. They should also talk to their dentists about other ways to ensure that they are receiving the right amount of fluoride through such means as supplements or topical applications. Supplements are illegal. Another interesting thing that we found back in 2011, we were having a big fight in Austin. We were able to find the MSDS sheet for Mosaic, the company that supplies our fluoride, as well as many other cities. All right. Look at this one piece in their MSDS sheet. Now keep in mind, these little safety data sheets are for workers. They're trying to warn their workers of what they're working with and what could possibly hurt them, okay? They had a whole section here on fluorosis. I'm pretty sure there's no children working at Mosaic. So this was a nice way to cover themselves. I think they see the writing on the wall, and I really think that groups like us have a big impact on this because we're getting out there, we're talking, and they're getting nervous. And this was a way to take all liability away. They're basically washing their hands, saying it's on you guys. And I tried to impart this to my city. I said, this is exactly what they're doing. You don't need to put anything about fluorosis on a material safety data sheet for workers. There's no reason to. And again, they just sort of say, eh. What does the American Academy of Pediatrics say? They say with over 3,000 studies or research papers published on the subject, few topics have been as thoroughly researched as water fluoridation. Yet, just a few months ago, the Fluoride Action Network and Michael Conant uncovered an ADA internal document that was back in 2011, just a couple months after that recommendation came out. Don't worry, I'm going to make it easy for you here. In that document, the ADA is asking the NIDCR, the National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research, that's who does all the research for them, they're asking them to now start doing some studies on fluoridation. They're asking them things like, can we look at genetics and age and sex and race? Can we look at things like people who have kidney disease or diabetes? And lastly, can we look at minorities? They seem to be unjustly affected by fluoridation. They even go so far as to say, why don't we give grants and monies to historical black colleges to do these studies? Makes sense, right? Just before this came out, two very prominent black gentlemen had voiced concern over this. One is the civil rights icon Andrew Young, and Reverend Gerald Durley had come out and said that they're absolutely being unjustly exposed to fluoridation and that their people are having worse effects. So they noticed that this was probably going to run. And so this is just another way of trying to backtrack and cover something that they never covered right in the first place. Let me show you this. This is this year. This is a letter from the ADA to the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. They are now looking in as fluoride as a potential carcinogen, obviously. A lot of studies coming out. They're now getting pushed to the wall, so now they're looking at this. So the ADA is basically convincing them it's not a carcinogen. Everything's good. Now, in all fairness to the ADA, they have references here. So I want to go through a few of the references, and let's see what we got. Here's a bold statement. Last April, the U.S. Public Health Service noted there was no compelling evidence that fluoride is associated with osteosarcoma. 4 and 5 are the references. Let's see what those are. 4 is a press release. 5 is a statement. Okay, this isn't science, guys. Let's go one more. The announcement was based on a 4-year evidence review of the effects of fluoride on human health, including any potential links with cancer. After careful review, the U.S. Public Health Service concluded that the available literature does not support classifying fluoride as a carcinogen. Another bold statement. Reference number 6. Oh, it's a recommendation. You know, I've done 2 scientific reviews for this academy, and both times, and I spent a lot of time on them, and both times Kendall and Phil came back to me and said, this is good, but you need more science. You got to check your reference. It's not good enough. Okay, that's for scientific reviews. This is arguably the governing body of all American dentists, and this is their references. I don't know why I threw this in. This is just more. I feel like Debbie Downer today, but I have to get it all out to you guys. And this is another. But I found this. This came out in Science 2013. Essentially, this is a brand new study where they can now insert fluorine site selectively into polyketides in vivo. So they're excited now because they have a way to get fluoride into more medications to get it to where it needs to go faster. So we got the fluoroquinolones, we've got the fluoride-building bone medicines, and now we're going to have some more. Can't wait. Okay, it's time to talk about Flint. I know that we all know about Flint and the excessive lead that was found in the water, and we even know that they ignored it for a while and told all the residents that it was safe to drink, even though it looked bad, and this turned out to be a huge debacle because it was very toxic. FSA is the fluorosilicic acid, so I use that interchangeably with silicofluoride. Same thing, okay? So we have found through lab experiments that when you put the FSA through lead pipes, it absolutely increases the corrosion. Studies have found that children living in areas with FSA-treated water have higher levels of lead in their blood. According to CDC, 20%, so it's probably higher than that. CDC has yet to warn the public about it, though. 2 examples. 1, 2009, Thunder Bay, Canada. They add the FSA to their water, and they change the pH from 7.54 to 7.27, nearly tripling the rate of lead leaching from the pipes. San Francisco, 2010, does the same thing. They lowered over 2 points. They had to add caustic soda. It was so bad to get to non-corrosive levels. Okay, Flint had no offsetting procedures, and they're one of the early adopters of fluoridation. So you think there's others to follow? Because I do. There was a study in 2007 where they looked at brass pipes, chlorine, chloramines, sodium fluoride, and FSA to see how they interact. The results were really scary. After just 1 test week, after they chlorine flushed the actual concentrations from 1 to 2 parts per million, the lead concentrations nearly doubled to 200 parts per billion. But when FSA was also included, that's the silicofluorides, lead concentrations jumped over 900 parts per billion. Trust me, this is the reason why it's happening. Let's look at some people that actually, again, made some bold statements that were based in science and the precautionary principle. Dr. Charles Hyde, past president of the AMA, this is, I believe, 1936. I am appalled at the prospect of using water as a vehicle for drugs. Fluoride is a corrosive poison that will produce serious effects on a long-range basis. Any attempt to use water this way is deplorable. Dr. Flanagan, who was the director of environmental health of the AMA in 1965, said this: the American Medical Association is not prepared to state that no harm will be done to any person by water fluoridation. The AMA has not carried out any research work, either long-term or short-term, regarding the possibility of any side effects. Precautionary principle. Dr. Albert Schatz, microbiologist and co-discoverer of streptomycin. Fluoridation, it is the greatest fraud that has ever been perpetrated, and it has been perpetrated on more people than any other fraud has. Again, the grammar is not so great, but it's probably not his native language. Still a brilliant statement. Okay, so we've got smart people out there that are talking against fluoridation, 14 Nobel laureates, thousands of scientists out there. We've got the science to back what I just presented to you. There's so much more to cover. I barely touched the surface, but we have some great resources if you didn't know this already. We've got books, we've got videos, we've got wonderful documentaries. One last thing I want to talk about, though. This word research, if you really think about the word research and break it down, it literally means to research, to look again. And that's what this academy is all about. Okay, we continuously fund research projects so that we too can find the truth and keep up with all the additional science and discoveries being made. It's important that as members in this academy, you know your science. More than a few of you have come up to me over the past couple of years and said, I'm on board with mercury. I get it. Science is there. I'm in. But on fluoride, I'm not quite there. I'm just not sure about it. Well, I hope I at least somewhat convinced you that you shouldn't be unsure about it. It's very clear. You just need to look. Also, someone ever challenges you and comes up to you, because they will, especially if you get involved in these debates like I do, be prepared. Okay, know your stuff. Be clear, be accurate, and don't ever let them catch you off guard.
I believe that our education, such as in South Africa and the Iraq, everywhere such as, and I believe that they should, our education over here in the U.S. should help the U.S. or should help South Africa and should help the Iraq and the Asian countries, so we will be able to build up our future for our children.
Thank you very much, South Carolina.
Okay. In her defense, she is pretty. Thank you. Thank you.